welcome to the pudding.
The sweet proof of research to back up what you already know about summer camp. My name is Travis Allison. My pronouns are he, him.
And my name's Dr. Mandy, and my pronouns are she, her. What we are most excited about today is that we get to introduce you to other camp researchers, and they are the juggernauts of the field, and we're super thrilled that they were able to come join us. Oh, I think so anyways, Jake. What you can't hear in listening land is a face that Jake pulled, but truly these are incredible researchers that are making massive impacts in the industry, in particular in North America, so we're really thrilled to have them here with us.
Yes, thank you all very much. I was looking, am I the only non-PhD in the room?
Yeah, possibly.
Yeah, okay, right on.
We
Excellent.
could do that wonderful sketch out of Monty Python where it's like doctor, doctor, doctor. I
Yes.
think it's something like that, professor, professor, and everybody's like, and they're very, very hoity-toity. These are some of the most down-to-earth humans too that happen to be walking around with these qualifications, thankfully.
Right on. So we're grateful to have you here. Thank you for joining us on the pudding. Victoria, what's kind of an overview of your research and your focus?
Yeah, great question. Hi, Travis. Hi, everyone. My name is Victoria Povilaitis, and I'm the Director of Program Innovation at Tim Hortons Foundation Camps. A big overview of what I do, my role really is that theory to practice, or that research to implications, and how we actually change things on the ground level. So in my role, I oversee our program quality assessments, our outcome and impact measurement, as well as our program development, using that information to really make changes at the ground level and impact campers on a regular daily basis.
So, Victoria, you're working really straight hands-on. What's the organization that you work for?
Yeah, so we're Tim Hortons Foundation Camps, or Tim's Camps. Hopefully, many of your listeners have heard of us. You know Tim Hortons, the coffee chain. We are the camp foundation that has partnered with them. So a lot of our funding comes from Camp Day. So here's a little plug to go and support your Tim Hortons restaurants on Camp Day this summer.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And Lori, what is the focus of the stuff that you're doing for camp? I know that you tell us where you work. I'm not going to spoil it for people. I'll let you spoil it for them.
Happy to. The focus part might be harder. Hi, Travis.
Sure.
Hi, Mindy. Hi, everybody. My name is Lori Brown. I am the Senior Director of Research and Education for the American Camp Association. So in that role, I do very little research. I am very grateful to be surrounded by a lot of researchers. And I think one of the best parts of my job is to cultivate, I think that's the right word, a community of research and a culture of research in and through and around camps. I don't think that is exclusive to researchers. Some of the best and most exciting research I've seen over my years in this role has been from camp directors or camp counselors or campers who are in high school. So, gosh, my focus is all over the place. Do a lot of things. You know, the tagline is that we work to elevate or bring value and visibility to camps through research. So it kind of all goes back to that. But have the great opportunity these days to do research that is tied to grant funding, which really allows us to resource camps to do their work. And then we get to hang out with them a little bit and learn from them and harness all the great work that they do and share that back out to the field.
Yes. And speaking of grant funding, Lori just secured the biggest grant fund ever for camps. And I think that's pretty amazing, Lori, what you've done.
It's on a team. Let's be clear.
I'm not saying you're taking the credit, but yeah, your team.
Definitely not, but really excited to get that out to the field.
Yeah, right on. And Jake, how about your stuff? Well, first of all, the full introduction, please.
Well, hello, everybody. It's great to be on the pudding. My name is Jake Sorenson, and I am the director and lead researcher at Sacred Playgrounds. And so we are a ministry. So we work with faith-based camps. Most specifically, we work with Christian summer camps. And our focus is on generating insights, equipping leaders, and connecting partners to help camping ministries thrive. And so we're really focused on insights to impact. And so helping individual camps find out what they're doing well, what they can celebrate. So there's a marketing angle to that, but also identifying areas for improvement to help them improve their programs and improve the experience for the young people. And then connecting the partners. And so we're really passionate about connecting camp with the permanent spaces of places like home and school and church, things that we found to be so important in research. And so we do that with individual camps. And then we work with some larger projects as well. And so that's where we get to play a little bit when we get larger grant funded projects. So we can talk about more of that as we continue, but that's essentially what we do at Sacred Playgrounds.
Right on. Well,
Very
I'm
cool.
grateful to have the four of you here because you're some of the best storytellers of the effects of what we do. And so I'm grateful. Thanks. So thank you to the three of you for joining us for the first time. And I'm going to turn things to Mandy.
Well, I think I'll jump right back at you, Jake, in talking in terms of this idea of playing in the research. I think I hear that amongst all three of you, that we all researchers can nerd out and really enjoy being at the contact level where we get to hear stories and ask questions, which is a super exciting part. And I think for us, in many ways, is play. It's being able to be amongst it and get that pulse, be amongst it and get that pulse check together. So, Jake, tell us a little bit about what you might be working on at the moment, what you can share, and what you're getting excited about there.
Yeah, thanks. So I love the analogy of the playground, of course. That's what we named our organization, Sacred Playgrounds. The idea that camp itself is a playground. We don't see it as, a laboratory where you just put kids and there's these specific outcomes that come out of it. We create the space and the conditions for these impacts to happen. And we let the relationships and the spirit do the rest. And so that's what's really exciting about working. So I love that analogy of play that you just used. So thanks for doing that. What am I working on at the moment? So we've got a lot of individual clients that we work with, but the most exciting thing that we've got going on right now is a grant-funded research project funded by Lilly Endowment Incorporated, and that is focused on the rhythms of faith. And so these rhythms of faith practices like prayer with family, attending church, reading scripture, doing service together as a family, conversations about who they are and their relationship with God. So these sorts of rhythms of faith that are practiced at camp, but they're declining among the young people in the homes and the families. And so what can camp do to be a catalyst for these practices in the permanent spaces? And by doing this, we really think we can connect the camp experience with the home experience, and help influence the permanent space. And so help influence camper well-being and family well-being in the spaces away from camp. So we're really excited about this project. We've got some great partners that we're working with, and we're kind of in the exploratory phase of that. So it's this exciting new project that we've got going on, but it'll be a 5-year project, and we'll be doing a longitudinal project that's called action research, where we try to impact these strategies at the camps themselves and measure it as we go, and hopefully develop some strategies that we can teach to other camps. So that's sort of the main thing that I'm really excited about right now. And of course, we're doing a lot of other things as well with individual camps and organizations.
Jake, I try to be the guy who jumps in and says, "You're talking academic something. Can you explain that? Can you just explain longitudinal, please?" Longitudinal,
yeah. So when we talk longitudinal, that's sort of the gold standard for a study where we're trying to measure impacts. And so usually what we're able to do at camp is do what's called kind of a pre-post study. So we can say, where were they before camp? Where were they after camp? And maybe where were they a couple months later? With a longitudinal study, we're actually following the same folks or the same camps in the case of this study over a longer period of time, usually multiple years. And so this is a very hard study type to do, and it takes grant funding to do something like this. And so we're excited to be doing that. And again, what we're following is we're going to be following the individual camps and trying to improve their practices and strategies over time, and following the families that they're working with during that period of time, and also the churches that they partner with. And so lots of dimensions to this project. And so that's what longitudinal means, though, over a long period of time.
Well, and I was going to jump in there with my hey, nerd listeners, action research. So action research is this idea that the people that are participants in the study are involved or intrinsic to the whole design and every step of the way. And so when we talk about kind of ideals when we're working with camps, this kind of research, it's super helpful to actually hear the perspectives and have those folks empowered to influence decision making along the research process. So that's what's pretty exciting. Sometimes it's called participant action research or just action research, but it's an interesting methodology if you've never heard about it before.
And this is one of the things that we're so passionate about, because we don't want to just do research for research's sake. We
Mm.
believe in the power of camp. We think that we've seen the evidence, and a lot of us have experienced it personally, that camp can have these impacts. And so we want to impact camps and help them succeed. And so that's one of the things that we bring to the table. And so doing action research is a more honest way of approaching it sometimes.
Well, and I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump there with that thread over to Victoria, because I'm aware of the fact that she's been working in quite a extensive piece of research that actually really picks up the participant or the child's perspective. And often when we do research on children, not with children. Victoria, do you want to talk about the projects you've had on the go that's really very creative and connected with children?
Yeah, no worries, Mandy. Happy to do that. To Jake's point about longitudinal research, we certainly have been doing longitudinal research with our campers, because we serve youth from low-income backgrounds and they come to us for 4 years. So every summer for 4 years, which gives us an incredible opportunity to connect with them on a regular basis and track those outcomes and that impact of the camp experience. So we certainly involve our youth in that way, in getting their perspectives of what they've learned, and how they're using that learning moving forward in their lives now. And we also, of course, work with our young people when they become less young people, and our young adults or move on into different spaces, and connect with them as part of our alumni work that we've done. But I know what you're pointing to, Mandy. We have done recently a project here with our young campers, actually, who come to us as part of a school program. So they come with us as a classroom, come to our camps, participate in our camp activities, and we've asked them to provide their insights on program quality while they're with us. So what does that mean? It essentially is, how do you create a camp atmosphere or environment that is intentionally developmental, meaning that they gain something and they learn something? There's quite a few different frameworks out there that describe program quality in a few ways, and we use one from the Weichert Center, which emphasizes creating safe environments, supportive environments, environments where youth are able to interact with others and learning, and engage in learning and bring that learning home. So as part of our creative mapping project, we've asked campers to map camp in whatever way they choose. Draw a map of camp, specifically identify quadrants where they can talk about what elements of camp feel safe to them, what elements of camp feel supportive to them, interactive and engaging, of course. So we've had hundreds of maps. I think in our fall experience, we had about 650 maps come forward from campers, and we're currently in the midst of analyzing all the camper maps from a spring program. So I anticipate we'll have somewhere close to 1,000 maps from campers that will allow us to understand how they see these 4 different environments at camp, which is really cool. And we're sharing it in a few different spaces as well. So keep an eye out for that as we move forward.
When you were talking about the maps, and I got to listen to Victoria present on this and some of her colleagues as well, what is, it's a bit of a weird and woolly world to analyze artistic products or, items that come to us. So what are some of the strategies or the curly bits have you encountered in trying to deal with a creative art elicitation type research?
Yeah, it's not easy, I'll say that much. And seeing creative representations from young people, what's really cool is that they can be so different, but that also means that it's quite challenging to draw some conclusions from the work that they've done. So we've had a bit of a team come together and work towards coding or analyzing, in non-nerd speak, finding the themes, the commonalities of what is presented in those maps. And we've spent hours and hours really digging into it. I think one of the real weird and woolly bits, as you put it, Mandy, is the fact that the framework we're using is grounded in social emotional learning. So really looking at how you feel on the inside. And one of the pieces is safety. We're finding from our campers that when they hear safe, they think physically safe. So they're pointing out places around camp that are physically safe. What we're really trying to get at is their perspectives of where they feel socially safe, emotionally safe, psychologically safe at camp. And the next piece that we haven't quite figured out yet, but we're working towards in different creative methods to get their insights, is why, or what about those spaces, what about those places, what about those people, what about those activities are actually allowing them to feel safe, allowing them to feel supported, interaction and engagement at camp. So that's the next phase, which we haven't quite gotten into yet, but that's certainly on our lookout now.
That's a fascinating question. I can't wait to hear what you come up with and what you learn, because those questions of how is that perceived and understood? What are the ingredients to the recipe, let alone how does it get cooked up into a beautiful, safe meal? Lori, I'm gonna hop to you and pick up another thread that I heard from Jake, is this idea that we are very much in the camp world, in the camp research world, trying to figure out how all that good stuff that happens at camp can transfer and transition into young people's everyday lives. And I'm aware of the fact, so when I talk to you, Lori, I know that you've got, let me think, I talk about the metaphor of plates. You have a lot of plates and there's a lot of meals out and you're doing a lot of cooking, and there's a whole bunch of cuisine as well. Lots of methodologies, lots of different research methods that are going into it. But I want to talk a little bit about the research you've been doing with your team about transitions and looking at how do we pick up all the good stuff from camp and bring it into every other part of our lives.
Gosh, I will start by saying, I don't know that we're looking at this yet. We are talking about the need to understand the connections between camp and home and the camp and these other spaces, like Jake said. We are really using now more regularly the language of the ecosystem. And this isn't our language. This is really the language coming out of youth development in general, recognizing that young people don't learn in one space and then pick up and move to another space and learn in that space and then pick up and move to another space. They learn, everywhere all the time. And that our job as teachers, as parents and caregivers, as youth development professionals is to provide continuity across those spaces. And I don't know that we've ever done that very well. But the language of ecosystems is really giving us a way to think about camp research differently. There's a history in camp research, and this, I think is justifiable given the utter lack of camp research for a long time. There's this history of saying camp is great. And of course, we want to interpret that as camp is better than everywhere else. Well, we've never really known that because we've only looked at camp. Like, does camp do great things? Great. But that doesn't allow us to say anything about anywhere else. We just started to tap into the everywhere else piece in our National Camp Impact Study that we finished up 2 years ago, and learned that camp does some great things, but so does school, and so does time with family, and so does completely unstructured time. And so that was kind of the first empirical insight we had into this idea that yes, camp is part of an ecosystem and lends value, but is not the only part of the ecosystem, of course, because an ecosystem needs diversity. So this is admitting that we have a long way to go to understanding that, but at least we're getting more comfortable thinking about camp as part of a developmental ecosystem.
I appreciate you though bringing that forward, and I think that's been one of in my own research criticisms, is that we have for a long time been very, very focused at what is camp good at and haven't asked a lot of the other questions. We haven't turned over the stones and looked at all the other things, but also that understanding that you're right, no child just functions in isolation for one week at camp, and that is like we can draw a real clean boundary line over what happens there and what doesn't, or attribute everything there or not. So thank you, because I think that's a research criticism that needs to be, listened to and turned over and engaged with. And of course, I love the language of ecosystem. When I was pointing at that, I guess in my head, I was thinking about the school partnership project that I heard about at ACA National. And I was thinking what I'm seeing there is exactly what you're saying, which is, if it's an ecosystem, then why aren't we collaborating and partnering and working together to, exaggerate or to emphasize those benefits? So, I do have another question for you, Lori, whilst I've got you, because I'm excited about this Lilly Endowment Fund. And Lori and I had a few chats when we were at the national conference, because this big piece of funding is around the development of character. And I was a quick to make some criticism. I'm like, character, why are we doing character? I was a bit of a grump. Lori set me on the right path. I want you to know that I've gone off and done some reading. I've done my homework, as you would expect from, nerds. We have to go and do our homework. The more I'm reading about character, the more excited I am. It is such a clearly articulated concept, and I didn't appreciate that. So, are you happy to talk a little bit about character and youth development? Is that okay if I put you on the spot?
Well, sure. And just know that I'm deep in it. So
yeah, okay. So I might have to cut you off.
You might have to cut me off, but I will say this, that I had a similar experience. You know, character sets off kind of all the alarms in terms of who's character, what's good character, what's bad character. And frankly, camps historically, and I'm talking going all the way back to the 1900s, were really at the forefront of saying, this is good character and all kids should have it.
Yeah,
The
absolutely.
industry writ large is not in that position anymore. The industry is so diverse and there are so many options to choose from. And I think camps do a really good job by and large of articulating what their values and mission is. So parents and caregivers can, you know, choose what aligns with their own values. So, you know, a big aha for me around character is that the definition of character itself is very, very simple. And I'm going to borrow this one from, you can actually find this on the characterlab.org website. Which is one's character includes the intentions and actions that benefit the self and others. I can't really find many ways to argue with that. You know, that really cuts across, I think, time, space, culture, all of those things. Where it does become culturally bound is when we start to define what the practices, maybe the virtues might be that are beneficial to self and others. And so, you know, where the research has really coalesced is that there are between 4 and 6, and yes, that is a coalesced number, between 4 and 6 domains on which unlimited virtues might live. For example, and again, characterlab.org, I think, does a nice job organizing these. You know, there are kind of one domain could be virtues of the heart. That is caring, compassion, empathy, right? And that list, when you think about it, like what comes from our heart that is helpful to others, that can go on and can also include virtues that are deeply tied to a specific culture that another culture might not even have a word for, right? There's also habits of mind. This is like persistence and teamwork, and, you know, that kind of like our the things we bring to the work we do. And so I think there is an approach, and this is what we are working on right now as we develop, you know, our plan for this grant, to provide spaces around which camp folks can think about character in ways that are aligned and meaningful for the communities they serve. So we're going to bring those resources to the table to help them understand the communities they serve, but we're not going to tell them what the specific values and virtues are of those communities. That's up to those camp providers. You know, our job, you know, through this grant is to provide places and spaces for camp folks to gather to do their work the very best that they can, but in the ways that's meaningful to their mission and the people they serve.
I think that definition, like you said, it cuts across, but it also doesn't put up fences. You know, it's useful. It's got a certain openness. It's useful and can be interpreted. It can be interpreted and applied into any kind of camp, and allow that camp also to make good sense out of what are we specifically focused on, and which domains do we pick up, and how do we interpret this in our context. So, yeah, when you first gave me that definition too, I was still like, but it's not specific enough. It's not prescribed enough. And I love it for not being prescribed. Now that I've done a bit more work and done more reading in the background, I didn't expect it coming, but I gave a lecture on character. So that I was like, oh, I got to do more homework. And I just got too excited. So thank you for igniting that. I'm very excited to see where that endowment, I know that we've got a year ahead of us before we see what the next steps are, but I'm excited to see where that goes and where it takes us as an industry. So I want to pose for you. I think I'll bounce back to Victoria. You'll put you on the spot next. Is how do you think, when you think about camp research, how do you see it impacting the world? How is it changing industry? I mean, micro, meso, macro level, you call it whatever. How is it changing the world?
I love that question because it really phrases it in a way that camp research can change the world, right? I think a lot of people, when they think about research, they think, oh, big theoretical stuff, like big academic scientists really doing stuff that just lives in the ivory tower and doesn't make any change. I like to think of it differently. It actually makes very real change at the ground level in individual experiences and individual connections between people. So especially what I do at Tim's camps, that's part of my role. That's part of my work, is taking everything that lives up in the sky and bringing it down to the ground level, where people can use that to actually shape how they go about having conversations with one another. So it's through program development, it's through program quality, it's through improvement, continuous improvement. An example is, if campers said that they like the barn and it's the safest place for them, great. What's happening in the barn at camp that allows it to be safe, and how we can make it even safer for kids. I think too, there's a lot that we can do around diversity, equity, inclusion, and access. One of my pressing questions, and hopefully I'll be able to address it soon, is really looking at people who do not access camp. Why don't they access camp? And even more so, those who do access camp and choose not to return. What is it that's preventing them from returning? What did not make it a safe place for them? What did not make it an enjoyable place for them, or an opportunity for learning and development? So in those questions, there are some very real answers and very real implications for on the ground in those individual interactions between people that can really truly create that big change.
When you get answers to these kinds of questions too, because I'm sure you do, you've gone and you've asked these questions, you find out about safety, comfort, meaningfulness, enjoyment, these kinds of things. What does it look like in terms of, you got that information back? What comes next? How do you actually make it happen on the ground?
Great point. It's tough. It's tough, right? Behavior change. Like oftentimes we have staff members who've been doing this for quite a long time, and they think, I've been doing it this way and it's working, so why would I change? It's in those really small interactions. It's taking a look at the activity, taking a look at the lesson plan, and saying, why don't we switch it this way? Why don't we try it this way and see how that feels? Why don't we take an activity that has had a name for many, many years, and we realize, oh, wow, that's actually cultural appropriation, or, oh, wow, that's maybe not something that, communicates safety to individuals. How do we change that? How do we reframe it and ask people to call it something different or facilitate it in a different way? But we're still getting to the heart of the activity and what the lessons and skills are involved in that. So it's through a lot of individual coaching, a lot of conversations, a lot of work with our leadership team as well, and helping to support people in making those changes in their practice that will ultimately support and impact kids when they do come to camp.
Very cool. Thank you. I might take it to you, Jake, next. That idea of, how does camp research change the world? What have you seen, and how does that work, and what impacts have you seen?
Well, there's really a couple ways. I mean, so as Victoria is pointing out, the specific on the ground interactions and action steps that come from research and evaluation. And so each camp, whether they're doing, professional quality research with an outside consultant or not, evaluating your programs and targeting areas to do better in. And so those are specific action steps that you can take, and everybody should be doing this. Everybody wants to do better. Everybody wants to serve their campers and their families better. And so research can really change the quality of your programs when you do it honestly at your own sites. But from a larger perspective, research can impact the entire industry. And so there's a lot of folks who are skeptical about camp and about the value of camp. There are people that actively ask questions or even challenge the validity of the camp space and why we're doing it in the first place. And when we have research to back things up and to lift up what's important about the industry, that can really help us tell the story better. And so we can tell individual camp stories better. That's great. But we can also tell the story of camp better. And so the reason that I got into research in the first place, I was a practitioner. I was at camp and I enjoyed being with kids, and really my place is with kids and at camp. And so what am I doing in front of a computer screen working with numbers and things like that? Well, it was when I was a practitioner and people were challenging these things and asking these questions, and all I had was anecdotes. And stories are powerful, and we need to be able to put those things into context. And so every other industry has all these numbers and all this research. And when I was working on the ground, there just wasn't much out there. And so it was a mentor eventually that said, hey, maybe you should do something about that. And that's what led me back into school to get the PhD and to work towards the research. And so, when I was first doing some of this investigation of what's out there, there were only a handful of things, and a couple names, people like Deb Bileski and Carla Henderson, who now I know, and that's been fun to get to know some of these folks who are just kind of legends in the research world. But the impact that those things can have, that now camp research is being taught in the classroom. And so the students that are coming through have access to peer-reviewed articles and journals that talks about camp. And so I've had college students write to me and just say thank you, because I wanted to write a paper on camp and my college professor said no. And I showed them your work, and now I'm able to write this paper. And so that's having a real impact, not only on individuals, but on the industry as a whole, as we get more attention to it, and as we get more respect for what camp is, and the part that it plays in the ecology of education. And, in the work that I do, the partnership in faith formation and working with families of faith. And so that's where I really see the benefits of research that can indeed change the industry and thereby change the world.
Well, I'm hearing a couple important things. We have much more credibility because we're able to evidence what we're claiming. And like you said, put it in perspective in the sense of, like, is this anecdote something that's individual to one person, one time, one place? Or is this an anecdote that actually comes across the whole spectrum? And then we need to investigate and ask more questions and see where it goes. But also that idea of, I don't know what the expression is, something about begetting, it begets. Like, once you start this movement of people are interested in doing the research and understanding better, it inspires others to ask more questions and to contribute. And the thing is just kind of this wonderful, beautiful, I'd like to say, snowball rolling down a hill and picking up some momentum. And I think everyone here knows Carla and Deb in some capacity and recognize and really want to respect the early work that they did. I'm assuming, has everybody else done their weird fangirl moment? I've done a couple of them with both of those people, and they're both the most humble humans. They probably felt totally embarrassed and awkward for me because I was being such an idiotic nerd. But one of the part of what is so lovely about those two women is that they really had a desire and still have a desire that that we pick up their work and evolve it and take it further and carry on. And I would throw in there, that's what's so cool about research, and the luxury at times of it, or the privilege of it, is that we have the opportunity to think new thinks and to take the ideas further and look at stuff that the camp industry doesn't have time or might not have a vision for. And I think that was, something that, Laura, you're kind of pointing at one point there, is the other thing is that sometimes research gives you this opportunity to look way beyond the scope of what camp has offered and bring those big ideas in to look at camp with those ideas. So that I'm throwing in my 2 cents, even though I wasn't being asked. Lori,
Can I pick up on something before
Sure.
we turn to Lori? So
Yep.
my role is to help people communicate the value of camp. And one of the things that's been a mission for me in the last 15 years is to get camp people to understand that we have our own language and we need to talk to people using language that other people understand. And I think that comes from exploring the impacts of this and talking the real parts of it. And so I think one of the impacts that comes out of this is the ability to tell better stories, obviously to back them up. But your part about the anecdote, Jake, is like, I have been fighting for 15 years to get people to stop saying that camp is magic because it's so nothing. And I think any people who have had a great camp experience would say yes, but it's not a way to describe anything to people who haven't had this experience. It just makes us sound like we're out of control when people do it. So I appreciate that.
I once heard Michael Brandwine say camp is like an inside joke. You had to
Mm.
be there to get it. And so in that sense, it's sort of indescribable. And so that's where people default to something like, oh, it was just magic. It was magical because it was something totally other. And I can't even bring the words to describe it. So one of our tasks in the research community is to help them describe it, to help put words and numbers to these experiences so that we can tell the story in a new way to people who might not have been there, who might not get the inside joke. And so that's one of the things that research can do.
Well, Lori, let's hop to you and ask you the same question. How do you see camp research changing the world? Big task.
I'm so glad for this question because in our jobs, right, we get so deep in the weeds. This is a good one to allow me to step back. And Victoria and Jake named, so many of the exact same things I would say. I'll add one piece, and I wish I had a specific story, but I don't. But over the years, interacting with camp professionals and seeing their face when they realize that the work they love is not only backed by research in a way, but has space for them too. That there are more questions that they can explore, they can contribute to the broader field. And that look that I see in camp professionals is this deep sense of knowing that their work is good, it's strong, it's true. I think we face, a battle of legitimacy in so many ways. I still ask people, what do you play volleyball all day? Gosh, I wish. Volleyball's great. But I don't.
I
there's
love playing guitar and games.
absolutely. And I have a whole nother rant on fun. Basically,
Right.
we talk about fun a whole lot more.
Yeah.
Fun's important. But for me, the changing the world is in, when camp professionals engage with research, when they realize the depth of the research is available to help them do their work, that they could participate in research. Not only does that translate directly in how they serve young people, but, and I don't have evidence for this, this is just my hope, it keeps them in the field. And we're at a time where we need those believing, feeling, passionate camp professionals now more than ever. So I have seen that awareness of research kind of make them feel like they've made the right choice by being in this work.
In some ways, it's deeply validating, isn't it? The research actually says this credibility is valid, that what's there, there's this substance, this massive knowledge that sits behind what you're doing matters. It really matters. It counts. It has an impact. And I think that's one of the great motivations and like deep sadnesses of youth work is that we are doing things with young people and impacting them, but we don't necessarily get to see where it goes. We don't get to necessarily see the fruition of it. We know, and that's something that the research offers. We know that it will be fruitful. We just don't always get to be there at harvest. Like we just don't always get to see it come full to life. The way that we watch these little moments, we think, oh, the seed's growing. Oh, good for, we've got to root down, we've got to start, but we don't necessarily get to see it through. And research can continue to articulate and validate those wonderful people who do work heart, mind, and soul. Like they really do give. And in an industry that doesn't necessarily recognize them professionally or financially, like we're not in the best shape in terms of valuing that work. But that the research can come back and say, actually, you were part of this. It matters. It really matters. And we're so grateful that you're doing this work. So yeah, I hear you. Thank you, Lori. Thank you, all of you, for adding those pieces into the puzzle. To me, I'm already making notes about next episodes. Because we're going to come after you and dig deeper. But Lori, just so you know, fun is high on my to-do list. We got to talk more about the fun.
I also want to thank you all for the work that you're doing, because I think it's very important, or we wouldn't be having this conversation. But I'm grateful for what it is. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to flip things around. Mandy, I'm going to turn this question to you first, and then we'll go to the others. What do you think needs to be studied about the camp industry that just isn't, because it hasn't been recognized, because money isn't there, because.
Oh, cool. How long's a piece of string? This is one of these. I didn't see it coming, so I didn't think this ahead. I would like us. I have a bias towards studying the staff. That's where the space I've always worked in, and so I think we continue to desperately need and want amazing young people to step into leadership roles and be staff. But we have yet a lot to learn in terms of this newer generation in hiring and retaining and knowledge management and how we validate and support them. I'm always going to hammer on about that. I think some of my burning issues are more around social justice and how camps discourses in a broader context actually are extremely exclusionary and can be quite problematic. I want us to maybe be a bit more more dig deeper into the messiness of what that is and see what people are doing that's great, and see what we can do to help support people making shifts that probably unintentionally are causing harm and that we need to kind of do. Again, I'm a sociologist, so I also think in terms of like big social head thinks and big like systematic thinking rather than or structural thinking and doing. So those are some of the things on my to-do list. I have also talked about with a good handful of folks about my concern about seasonal work and the post-camp low mood experience and what is happening for those often staff, and for the ones that don't necessarily get out of the funk either. What can we do and how can we equip the camp industry to support those young people and teaching them a handful of skills that helps us buffer and deal with the stressors of life, including this very significant change of identity that comes from leaving camp and returning to our home lives. So those are all the things on my list in the short-term future uh, for now.
Great.
There'll be more next week.
I want to say again on the pudding that that research about the blues after camp and coming out of it is so personal to me, and it was exactly my experience when I was a seasonal staff worker, and how hard that was for me to come home from camp and go. So yes, let's
Let's get her done. That's
yeah,
my
let's get
attitude about research as a general rule, is get her done.
done.
I actually, Travis, I was talking to someone, another researcher, and she talked about the idea of ego death, that we have a sense of identity that
Yeah,
has to die and be grieved as we
makes
transition
sense.
to our outside of camp identities, and that our inside of camp identities are quite powerful now. I know you don't like magic. I've written a paper on the science of that magic, but one of the sciences part of that is that intensity of relationships and identity and emotion inside of camp. It just can't be maintained for long periods of time, and so
Sure.
that buildup is really powerful. But then when you leave, it can be part of the big drop. So yeah, there's lots to do to scratch around and try to make some sense out of that one.
Yeah, right on. So for the other three of you, it doesn't have to be directly in your within your research area or close to your research area, but I want you to think about what is the big things at camp that we need to be looking at that we're not. Jake, do you have a thought on what that could be?
Yeah, for sure. This grant is pursuing one of them, of
Hmm.
course,
Yeah.
the partnership between camp and the other permanent spaces. What
Yeah.
does that partnership look like? How can we lean into that more effectively? And how can we help camps be more effective at making sure that what happens at camp doesn't stay at camp, right? It's not Vegas. We want them to go home and have these things last. For weeks, for months, for years, and we want to impact those homes and those other permanent spaces. And so really looking at that and helping camps understand that, I think is a really is a live wire, so to speak, something that we can really plug into. The other thing that I think really needs to be addressed, and it's really hard in the camp research community, it's almost a political thing because we talk about camp as camp, right? So everything falls under this big umbrella of camp, and camps are so diverse. There's so many different types of camps, and it's not just that, like I work with religious camps, and Victoria works with Tim camps, and then there's some special needs camps and some medical specialty camps. It's not even that. It's there are day camps, and there are overnight camps, and there are camps that last the entire summer, and there are camps that are immersed in the wilderness, and there are camps that the closest thing that you have to the outdoors is a potted plant, or something like that, right? So you've got these varying degrees of how we lean into the camp model. There's family camps, there's all these different models of camp. And so what's the difference? What are the really impactful
Yeah.
methods and strategies of camps?
Mhm.
And how can we help other spaces lean into those things? And it doesn't have to be necessarily good, bad, right? Because some people don't have access to overnight camp, so day camp is the option, or family camp is the option. But understanding some of those differences and understanding that we call all these things camp, but we really should start to differentiate and look at some of the strengths of these different programs. And something as simple as centralized versus decentralized, program style. There's active conversations among directors in terms of what is preferable, and can we actually look at that from a research perspective without insulting the folks that lean into a certain model? And that's where I say it becomes a little political, because we want to have discussions with the whole industry. We don't want to exclude people. And at the same time, we're really interested in what makes the most difference, and what are the methods that we should really be leaning into. You know, the people in education don't shy away from this. They lean into methods and they give recommendations about how to structure a classroom. And you know what? Classrooms have changed. You know, we still sometimes look at classrooms as, oh, they're sitting there listening to a lecture. That's not, you're crazy. That's not what they're doing at all. I mean, have you met a teacher? Do you know the creativity that they're putting into what they're doing in the classroom? And they're using a lot of the methods that, you know, we teach at camp in the classroom. And so I think we can lean into those things too, and not be overly protective of the way we've always done things, because camps thrive on tradition. We love doing things the way we do it. We understand camp the way we've experienced camp, and to expand people's understanding, I think, is important. So, okay, that's my soapbox for that.
Perfect.
In
Thank you.
Australia, something you described, I just want to mention, in Australia, outdoor education and outdoor recreation were super, super distinct camps. And there was camps, there's too much camp. But there's just so little crossover, and they didn't help each other. There was lack of collaboration. There was a hierarchy, and that kind of dynamic, I've noticed it a bit, but not nearly as much since coming back to North America. And I think part of it is because outdoor education and camps, so recreation, tend to all happen on the same site, and often with similar, if not the same,
Right.
staff. But in Australia, it was always different staff, different qualifications, different degrees. And so there was this distinct, like, we're not going to talk to each other. And I always found that really, really challenging and problematic, because those guys are doing a great job. Why don't we build from there? Like, why would we reinvent this for ourselves? So it has a bit of both ways. There's this beautiful collaboration that's possible across diversity, but at the same time, recognizing that different strokes are for different folks, whether that's because they don't have access to different varying kinds, or whether, like, sometimes we put our kids into a certain program because we're hoping for a certain outcome, and we might change that when we're helping them trying to develop a different set of skills or abilities, or a different kind of fun. Yeah, you're right. I don't know that the research distinguishes particularly well. Sorry, Travis, you're trying to drive the train here, but
No
one
worries.
of those things.
Excellent. Thank you. Lori, what do you think the whole is in research?
So I think the whole is deconstructing camp. I think we've said multiple ways and in multiple different ways here today that we actually have a pretty good sense of the magic of camp. We actually kind of know what that is. We've broken that down. It is teachable. It is measurable. It is specific. Sorry to burst the magical bubble. There's, of course, a lot of unknown about how those parts come into play, and that's where the magic happens. But in terms of understanding the mechanism of camp, we kind of get it. But what I would like to understand is, what could camp be for the communities that we're not serving? We're not even close to serving, right? We talk a lot about getting people to camp. Mm-hmm. Like, how can we remove barriers? How can we provide access? How can we just get young people? You know, family camp is a beautiful way, you know, innovation, I think, when we're talking about access. But let's take that several steps backwards. What if we went to a family or a community of families and said, what could camp be for you? Mm-hmm. Where would it happen? What activities would it include? Would it even be in the outdoors? There are whole communities that have really, really traumatic histories in the outdoors. Camp in and of itself is a problematic name for a lot of communities. So I would like to better understand, you know, all the different ways that what we call camp could be reinvented by the communities that we're not even close to accessing.
Yeah.
There was a moment where I used to, mostly when I was writing about what the magic is, not that I did a particularly great job, because I was looking at a teeny tiny speck. And like you said, lots of pieces, lots of puzzle, lots of putting it together. But I was asking this question of mobile camp. Like, could we pack all of the things we needed into a bus or into a trailer and drive to the community and just, you know, like, pop the trailer open, have a couple key facilitators, people with amazing skills, and run camp there. And I happened to be in Australia, and we were talking about rural communities that were really, really underfunded. The young people who would never in their lifetime see an ocean, and people assume that all Australians spend their life on the beach. If they don't assume that we're all at Ayers Rock at Uluru, so there's a couple stereotypes running around there. But that idea of being able to pack it all up into a bus or something and show up and run camp on the site and then pack it up and take it to another rural community. So, yeah,
That is
I
happening
think,
and really cool. Jake just mentioned, or kind of mentioned an example. Fresh Air Fund in New York really innovated around that during the pandemic. They brought their camp to city streets. They just opened up that trailer right in the middle of a block, and there was camp. So I think that is another frontier for camp. Absolutely.
that's
Yeah,
amazing. And
Christian
Victoria
camps have been
just,
doing
oh, go
traveling
ahead.
day camp for several decades, where they pack up everything in a van or a trailer and go to usually a church, a partner church, and they set up camp, and it's day camp, but they try to bring camp to that space. So
Are these
camp to
programs
congregation.
targeting particular communities that have limited or no access to camp kind of situations? Is that part of the deal?
From my perspective, I'm seeing this in two ways. One, yes, this is Fresh Air Fund being an example of a camp in New York that serves, urban youth. Yes, so it's designed to break down those barriers to bring camp to them. I'm also seeing this in terms of camp school partnerships. So I think Victoria is gonna be the best to speak on behalf of how Tim's is thinking about this, about bringing camp to a classroom. And that's
Yeah,
my
with
thought to Victoria, if I'm allowed to just. Oh, and
No,
yeah, I would love to hear from
100%.
Victoria and
Yeah,
her
yeah.
program.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I'm happy to share a little bit about it. It's definitely still in pilot stages. Like, we're really starting to begin to create the planning, but this year is Tim's Camp's 50th anniversary. So we have been providing camp experiences to youth for 50 years, but that has been bringing youth to our camp locations. So what is the next 50 years? We're really starting to look at, how do we bring camp to kids? How do we bring camp to different school communities, different more rural communities that don't typically have access or aren't close to one of our 7 camp locations? So we're really starting in spring of 2024 to do single day events, and really looking into more multi-day events where we go and partner with a local school or community from low-income backgrounds or a low-income community, and we go to that school and we provide, one activity block of programming on, for example, Thursday afternoon, and then the next Thursday afternoon we come back and work with the same classroom, the same school group, to provide the next activity block, all part of a progressive experience. And so, keeping in mind, what do we know about camp? How do we know camp is working? What elements of camp can we bring and replicate in community? Probably, arguably, the only 2 things that we can't do, well, 3, I should say. The high ropes tower, we can't bring the high ropes tower. That's kind of difficult to replicate in a classroom community. But that sense of separation that is so key for overnight experience, we can't quite replicate that. And also, to a degree, being away from your phones and your devices, which many of us, I would think, can agree upon the fact that camp is a great opportunity for young people to be away from their tech, and provides them great opportunity to learn different social emotional skills and relationship building skills. We can't replicate that in a school community, but many other things about camp we certainly can. And so we're looking to build that new in-community program for Tim's Camps.
Very cool. Thank you for sharing that. Gosh, my mind's blowing up over the ideas of things that there's so much good stuff happening, and I also, very Australian, but I reckon it's happening, but we don't always know about it. And how do we continue to bring these things up to the
Mhm.
surface and share and invite people into these ideas, if not into relationships and networks where we can call each other and be like, hey, friend, I need a hand, or can we partner to get a thing done? Very exciting. Thank you.
Victoria, is there any research that you think that is there a hole in the research that you hope somebody fills?
I think there's still so much that can be done, but to some comments from earlier, my interest area is the exit from camp. And I speak to that in a few different ways. So the post-camp blues, as a staff member, I experienced it. I know many other people who experienced it, and I'd love to know more about that. But I also think to a degree, it's the perhaps a bit of the unchosen exit. So campers, I've started to dig into a little bit of early departures, campers who aren't being successful at camp, and what that exit looks like, so that especially for our populations, we're not doing additional harm or causing additional trauma. If they come to our camp location, unfortunately, we can't support their needs. What does that look like? So we've started to work on that a little bit, but I'd be curious to learn more about that in different contexts, different camp contexts and camp settings, with specific populations, and also even just the not the forced exit or the unchosen exit, but the people who just choose not to come back, what that looks like, why they're not coming back, and those who just come to the end or age out of camp, what that exit looks like, and how they really bring elements of camp with them into their life beyond.
When I worked in a cancer charity, we intentionally had programs and strategies around ending the camp life cycle, knowing that the relationships in the community they built amongst themselves within the programs that we offered and ran were so essential, but that they couldn't stay there forever, that they had to actually move on and mature out of those programs. And particularly, we were always wary or aware of those who had developed a real dependency on the charity organization, where they weren't actually they hadn't learned the skills to actually create those communities for themselves and to carry those on into their lives. And so that it's funny that memories pop back up, that actually we were really intentional and very strategic about that when we recognized that somebody was getting a bit stuck. Like any good teacher, somebody getting a bit stuck, you're trying to help them move into the next step. And I don't know that we have those conversations, and certainly not in camp research, about what is an appropriate life cycle, what is maturing out of the camp world. I mean, we talk often about retaining staff. What if this is just healthy maturation rather than a retention problem? This is maybe we've served our purpose in their lives, and these are now capable, independent, working adults, and they've moved on, and we can't hold them forever. So, so much good work to do. We just need a gazillion dollars, and then we can do it. Well, I want to thank you very much. I think, Travis, I'll hand that part on to you. This has been such a joy.
Yeah, I am grateful to the four of you for all the work you're doing and for being a part of this conversation with us. Lori, if people have some follow-up questions, how could they get a hold of you?
They can email me at Lori Brown, that's LBROWNE, don't forget the E, at acacamps.org.
Lori, thanks for being on.
Thanks for having me.
Victoria, how can they get a hold of you?
Yeah, similarly to Lori, just email me. So my email address is victoria.povilaitis@timscamps.com. I'll spell the last name for you because it's a tricky one. It's POVILAITIS, and it's at timscamps.com. S on both Tims and Camps.
Multiple Tims, multiple camps.
Yep.
That's great. Victoria, I'm so grateful you're here. Thank you. Jake, how can folks get a hold of you?
Well, you can check out our website, the sacredplaygrounds.com website. That's playgrounds, plural. And you can email me directly at jake@sacredplaygrounds.com. You can check us out on Facebook or Instagram at Sacred Playgrounds. And we also have a podcast, the Sacred Playgrounds podcast. So lots of different ways to connect with us and connect with me directly.
Thanks for being on, Jake. I really appreciate it.
I think it's important that listeners, that there are show notes. You'll be able to get contact information for our three special guests. So if you don't remember Victoria's last name from listening to it once,
If you're driving,
we will have it all spelled out with Brown with an E for Lori as well. You'll be able to check us out and check them out there.
Yep.
Wow.
That's at gocamp.pro/thepudding.
Absolutely. Thank you for being a part of this. Thank you, listeners, for joining us today. And if you didn't know, now you know, Camp Pros.